Hi, I'm Justin Colley, an economist, researcher, and connector of three worlds academia, policy, and business that don't talk to each other nearly enough. Welcome to From Ideas to Innovation, a podcast dedicated to providing in depth conversations with entrepreneurs, academics, and policymakers who've been talking past each other for way too long.
There was a time I ended up driving for Uber to make ends meet, like around 2018, a couple of years after I founded it, just to meet ends meet at home because fundraising ended up being slow and payrolls were being saved by some donors at the last minute or had to be suspended for a cycle.
This episode, I was proud to have my boss, Gonzalo Schwarz, on to talk about the American Dream, his American Dream story, starting Archbridge, and a new report that Archbridge released that he authors called the American Dream Snapshot. Gonzalo Schwarz is president and CEO of the Archbridge Institute. Gonzalo focuses on researching and writing about the American Dream and human flourishing. He's the author of the Institute's American Dream Snapshot, which we'll talk about today in this episode, and has written for media publications such as The Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, The Hill, Fortune, among many others. You can follow his Substack, Living the Dream, where he writes about the American Dream. Gonzalo has a master's in economics from George Mason University and a business administration degree in economics from the Catholic University of Bolivia. He grew up around the world in Uruguay, Israel, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Gonzalo saw firsthand how poverty and socioeconomic challenges affect individuals and societies. This led him to a lifelong curiosity about what leads people to flourish and achieve their fullest potential. I really hope you enjoy the conversation. All right, Gonzalo, thank you for joining From Ideas to Innovation.
Thank you very much, Justin, for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, well, I can't say no to my boss, so, very happy to be here. Of course, no, obviously great to have you on. So you've had a unique childhood. You lived in 4 different countries before moving to the U.S. You were born in Uruguay, you lived in Israel, Bolivia, Ecuador. What did you learn living all over, and in what ways did that kind of shape you, having all that kind of diverse experiences?
Yeah, no, but we moved a lot from my parents' jobs. There wasn't anything that they were in the foreign service or anything like that. It was just better opportunities that we're trying to look for in each country. My parents were trying to look for in each country. So it was more the economic opportunity kind of reasoning. But and at the time when you're growing up, moving countries is not as exciting because you're losing friends, you're losing your whatever you're used to doing in those different places. But in time, you get to appreciate that more, which is what happened to me. I think at the time when you were a kid, 10 years old, moving countries, you're not as happy. But I think what I learned throughout all those experiences is that in every country that I've lived in, people are more similar than we think. There is more that unites us as a human race, I think, as human beings, than divides us. So people all across the world, I think they want human flourishing. They want to fulfill their fullest human potential. They want just a good and better life for themselves and their kids. So I think that's those commonalities and those things that unite people are are rare to discuss. We're just always focusing on the negative aspects or what or the differences, but they're much smaller than we think. So for me, giving an appreciation that people are good, that people are pursuing the good life, that people have the same families, family stories, either good or bad, in any place that we are that we've lived in, and that there's good people everywhere, and obviously there's bad people everywhere too. But I think there's much more, I think, that unites us than divides us. And when I came to the United States, is where I sort of fell in love with the concept of the American dream. And I think we can go on about it more later, but I think it's a unique cultural ethos that the United States has that no other country has. So what I learned from all those experiences as well is that that uniqueness about America is about that founding vision or ethos of the American dream.
Right. I think that's really interesting, and I love kind of hearing that perspective about there's a lot more that unites us, and I think this is true. Even just I just got back from seeing 3 different countries, and I found the same experiences. Obviously, didn't move there and live there for a long time, but just the people there. There's a lot of things that people have in common, and we focus on our differences, whether that's politically or differences culturally, socially, whatever, but we have a lot in common, and we actually, no matter, could be in different countries and have things in common with people. and you could be, different parts of the state, different parts of the country. Like, there's a lot that unites people and a lot that excites people and wants people, they want to live a good life, right? And like you said, whenever you moved to the U.S., that was you exploring what has now become your American dream. So you studied economics in undergrad in Bolivia, then you came to George Mason University for your master's. So what were you interested about economics specifically? Like, what questions were you interested in answering?
Yeah, so those experiences that I've had in different countries definitely shaped me why I started studying economics. So I was interested in solving poverty. That's sort of my main motivation to study economics. Uruguay is certainly not very poor, but I still saw poverty and underdevelopment there. And when I was doing my undergrad in Bolivia, at the time it was certainly very poor. And to this day, it's better off, but it's still there's a lot of places in Bolivia, and Bolivia more broadly compared to other countries is much poorer. So I started studying economics or getting an interest in it even from high school because I was just interacting with a lot of people in the community. I wasn't, I suppose, poor myself. We're just very middle income family or lower to middle income throughout our lives mostly, but we weren't in deep poverty. But we did interact with a lot of people in different communities. You obviously go around. I volunteered in different places, and I saw that it was really, I think, touched me to the point that I wanted to study economics because I thought economics held the key and the answers as to how to solve poverty. And so I studied in undergraduate in Bolivia, didn't get too many answers as to why that was the case, or like the teachings that I had there weren't as as good as I think they were later as I studied my master's at George Mason, and it was a good complement to just living in the United States and seeing a developed country and why the United States was as developed or is as it is in terms of the importance of private sector entrepreneurship, rule of law, and institutions. I think those issues were really like came within also studying economics, but with a complement of living here and learning more of that on the ground that I didn't learn
Mhm.
in Latin America. But I think that was the bigger motivation. I was just interested on how do we solve poverty, which is
Yeah.
just a small question
Right.
compared to others. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love the saying that when you start thinking about why some countries are rich or why some countries are poor, why some people are rich and why some people are poor, it's hard to think of any other question, right? That's a very motivating question that you're like, okay, it's really hard to think about anything else whenever something like that, yeah, that different, seeing that the kind of different outcomes across the world. Um,
Yeah,
it's hard to
definitely.
consider other things. Yeah.
No, for sure.
So,
That was my case as well, and that's where if I volunteered somewhere or if I was in some place, it's like you when people are asking you, Latin America, it happens a lot that panhandlers people ask you for support or volunteer in some an orphanage or something like that, and you want to help people with maybe supporting with your time, supporting with your money, which are still very important, but it doesn't go to the root questions and the root reasons why some countries, as you say, are poor, some others are rich. So that's why I sort of really wanted to hone in because this I wanted to think more about the long term of why this
mhm,
happens.
yeah. So let's then jump to the American dream kind of as a organizing idea for you. So
Mm.
when did that kind of idea, was it whenever you were thinking about moving to the States? Was it kind of thereafter? Like, when did the American dream become this, kind of core foundation for you, as opposed to just something like, you know, development, like you were talking about, or economic freedom or something like that? Like, why the American dream?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, when I moved to the United States, I just really fell in love with the idea of the American dream, seeing success, seeing entrepreneurship, seeing people pursuing the dreams, taking risks and achieving them. And but it really started, and I shared that in one of my one a write up that I did for my Substack a while back. It started more as it was started thinking about it more as a concept or an idea, as an ethos for the United States on a trip to Disney World with my family. When I was we had our first kid, Sebastian. He was 2 years old, and I was watching a lot of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse with him in the house. But and he really loved Mickey Mouse and all that universe. And it was just in watching one of the shows where all the characters like, oh, you can be this, you can be that, and just trying to inspire kids to pursue their dreams. And then as we were walking through the park, there were a lot of signs in the park with different quotes from Walt Disney himself, because the park was under renovations, as it, I suppose it's always the case. There's a lot of quotes by Disney throughout the park about if you can dream it, you can achieve it, or remember it all started with a mouse. Like in his case, like it all for him, like Mickey Mouse was his first, which in actually it wasn't his first one. The first design that he had, what he got robbed of it. Anyhow, that's a different story. But yeah, but so for him, really, all the success started with a mouse, as he says. But like I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And so when I was reading those quotes in the park and watching that show, it's like, well, obviously, he's not saying that kids should pursue being princesses and kings and all that, because obviously that's not a common thing to be nowadays. It's very rare. But it was more about, well, you just chase your dreams, just dream, be inspired by something, and take action and pursue it. So for me, it was that sort of it clicked. And it clicked for me as well because I didn't relate the success and achievement that I saw here to that when I came here from the beginning to that specific concept. But then I started tying it more because people are successful, and I've known successful people in other countries. But it's like, well, here it's that motivating cultural ethos of the American dream that sort of spurs them to do it. So I think one of my goals from the beginning was always to rekindle the American dream because when I came here, I saw it, I was excited. And then as I'm reading news, as I'm watching people on TV or media or anything, that people are actually down on the American dream. People were not appreciating the American dream for what it is and the success that it has brought this country. So it's like, well, it's a very underappreciated concept. And I think we need to rekindle it because in the United States, where it should be much more people should agree that it's alive and well and should be inspired by it to pursue their own dreams. It wasn't the case. So it's like, okay, wow, this could be. And for me, I think it was a big goal that became a big goal in my life. And I tied it to poverty, to what I was thinking about before, or to economic freedom or development more broadly, because it's about. I think the concept itself is just bigger than just poverty or economic development. Uh, because it's unique, obviously, in the United States as an inspirational and motivating cultural ethos, and it's basically human flourishing in the American context. The definition of it, of the concept itself, is a land where people can live better, richer, and fuller lives, and all of that comes with more economic freedom, more economic development for sure. But I think those things just provide part of the answer. When people have economic freedom or the conditions of economic development to be successful, it doesn't mean that they will then take actions to use those conditions in their favor and climb the income ladder or flourish. It's and even then, just part of the American dream is economic success, and which begets from economic freedom. But I think the concept of the American dream is just much richer because it talks more about fulfillment and flourishing, overcoming barriers, which can happen in many cases with or without economic freedom. Because you can see that fulfillment and flourishing countries that have less economic freedom too. But I think it you can find and pursue happiness and pursue more fulfillment in the United States than in any other countries. So it's a concept that I think encompasses much more than than just that. It's the pursuit of meaning and flourishing in one's life. So I think for me it was
Yeah.
because it became after obviously started studying poverty. It's not about like poverty is the how we all are born. That's the natural state of the world is poverty. So for me, it just became first of all transitioning into a more positive and uplifting concept that it's more as wealth creation as a flourishing itself. That's more of a aspirational concept, human flourishing, social mobility, more than just poverty. Poverty is it's easy. It's basically how we're all born. How do we get from that to success? That's obviously the question, and how do you achieve flourishing and prosperity is the question. So for me, it gives my own life and our own work at Archbridge, I think, more of that organizing idea for how we should think about the world. That it's more about achieving that, and economic freedom, development are definitely necessary and a big component of it, but it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah, poverty is just, I love the saying, which is poverty is just the natural state of the world. It's how most of human existence has lived in. We don't need an explanation for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just is,
Yeah.
that is the natural state. What needs to be explained is all of the vast wealth and growth and opportunities and standards of living. And I do think the American dream plays an important part there. So, kind of building on everything you've said so far. So, like you said earlier, you moved here for your master's degree, and it's a pretty common kind of on ramp. But what made you decide to stay here rather than taking what you learned and back to any of the four countries that you've lived in before?
Yeah, I think it's definitely why most people come here. It's because it's the land of opportunity. It's truly the land of opportunity. And back in Latin America, even as an economist, which is still like a good profession, there's still only a few jobs I could have done there, maybe three or four jobs that are typical for an economist, which is actually going into banking, which is not really related to the economics, more about finance or management, but into banking, going to maybe a government research organization and being called the central bank or the government as a in a ministry, and that's it. There's not a lot of options. I think the United States offers there definitely more options and more paths to flourishing for any profession, and obviously more as an economist. So I thought just more selflessly as a pursuit of my own goals in life and flourishing, I think I would have more opportunities here in the United States. Just what I think a lot of people come here for. But I think for that for the field that we're working on now at Archbridge and for the work that we're doing, there's it's also very much about impact. I think I can do the most good from here to affect change in the work that we do by partnering even also with people all across the world, including Latin America. So I can, in a way, give back to Latin America by doing a much better job here and just partnering with more people back home. And for our profession, well, you as a PhD economist, me as just a master's. uh, I think in economics, the main journals are here. The main academic institutions that focus, that are experts, that have more expertise in economics are here. Research institutions, and more broadly, academic, but not academic as well. And just the overall expertise in the topic and in the industry is the United States. So I think if you're going to do something in your field, you have to go to where most of the best things are, where the most impactful people are working in that, which means maybe I have more competition here than I would have in Latin America. But it's also the upside that it's potentially more impact in removing barriers to flourishing both here and across the world.
Yeah, with that, more competition leads to more potential impact in many
Yeah,
ways. Yeah,
definitely.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
So, okay, taking everything together that you've said so
hmm
far about your kind of career trajectory, your life trajectory, is there a specific comparison that you draw between an institution, a norm, an ethos here versus Uruguay, Ecuador, Bolivia that crystallizes why the US works differently, and why do we see those kind of differences in outcomes versus some of the more, traditional answers we would hear and expect?
Yeah. Well, maybe the first one is a bit more, you expected more, maybe, but in the US, things work. It's, I know people think things don't work in the US. There's a lot of challenges and things that we have, but things work, institutions work. And it certainly has a lot to do with the founding documents, separation of powers, respect for the rule of law. I think it's broader than that. And one of the things I remember, a Chilean economist, Jose Piñera, was a great one of the second generation, I think, Chicago boys that reformed Chile. What he said once, was a big student of the founding fathers. What he said about the U.S. and Latin America is that in the U.S. we had founding fathers, and in Latin America we had founding generals. So in the first case, it's more about the founding fathers having that vision for the country built on those institutional guardrails like the Declaration of Independence, obviously Constitution, separation of powers, and all that. And where even though there were leaders like generals, I suppose, like Washington, or there were other leaders like Jefferson and others, it was more of a national project. It wasn't that much of an individualistic project. In Latin America, it has always been who's closer to power, either to the Spanish crown before the Wars of Independence, or to that founding general that liberated the country. The thing lends itself more to cronyism and corruption, and I think in the U.S. that was the main difference, even from the beginning. Not to say that there hasn't been or there isn't cronyism or corruption here, but I think it sets apart that there's it's a national project, a national vision, and I think and maybe because of that, maybe one thing I would say that's another difference is a cultural norm. And I think it has to do precisely with the American dream too. And you can say it was also in the Declaration of Independence when it comes to the pursuit of happiness. But aspiration, ambition, achievement, and that pursuit, as I said, of the American dream of a better, richer, and fuller life is not frowned upon in the United States. There's certainly people who might want to push us in that direction and frown upon success and achievement. But I think broadly, success and achievement are celebrated, pushing their frontier in various walks of life, either geographically or in innovation or in many fields. That's just celebrated. And it says markets as vehicles to make all of those things happen are celebrated. Being an entrepreneur, an innovator, that's celebrated. But in Latin America, it's not celebrated or respected as much. When someone, I think, is successful, because of what I mentioned about the region itself starting off differently. It could be, if you're successful, people might say, "Oh, it's not about the success; it's more about, oh, what did he do in terms of cheating or corruption or anything else to get into that position?" And being part of a public entity or the intellectual class or other non-entrepreneurial fields, maybe that's more celebrated than all the other things that are celebrated in the US. You can say that maybe that's also the case in Europe. Uh, that entrepreneurship is not as well respected, or revered, not revered, but at least achievement is not as important there. And I think that's the main cultural difference and norm. And as I said, it has to do a lot with that American dream and the pursuit of betterment.
Yeah, so I take this similar to kind of a Deirdre McCluskey explanation about how did Europe and the West get rich kind of first, and
Yeah.
it was a lot of, and obviously, like you pointed to, kind of how those cultural norms have changed, and that there's less celebration of that, certainly in Europe relative to here at least, and that basically the idea being that once you started accepting that this is a worthwhile profession, right? Entrepreneurship, opportunity, growth, that like basically the your luck in life was not stagnant.
Hmm.
Once that was appreciated, that people can, improve their own situation, that once that is kind of culturally accepted, that was when you started seeing really kind of a lot of the innovation and a lot of the opportunities that existed. So I'd say some of that conversation, which I think is a very, very worthwhile and interesting. So let's go to starting Archbridge, which
Hmm.
I've been there full time now for a year and a half, and part time as a fellow since I believe like 2021 or 2022.
Hmm.
So, but it's been around for, we just hit the 10-year anniversary mark.
Hmm.
So let's go back in a time machine. 2016.
Hmm.
What was the moment you decided, okay, I'm starting my own think tank? Was there a catalyst event, or was it more of kind of a slow realization, something you kind of always had in the back of your mind of, this is something I want to do?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's slow, but also at the same time, because it started, as I said, like when I was watching like Disney characters saying you can pursue your own dreams. Like, oh, what's my own dream? Well, my own dream was certainly, how do we address poverty, or how we increase flourishing. That was sort of my what I wanted out of what I studied and what I thought was my life mission. But I was just eager with those examples, moving to the US, to become an entrepreneur and live out my own American dream, thinking about the story of America and seeing so much entrepreneurship, the pursuit of flourishing, pursuit of big goals happening here for different people. Like, I thought I wanted that for myself, and my own American dream is in a way rekindling the American dream. So it's sort of full circle. But at the same time, in my role, when I was in my previous job, I was exposed and was working with, I think, some of the most impactful think tanks in the world. And I saw that great work was happening, and I wanted to be a more integral part of that work happening, and to be in the field of sort of competing in the battle of ideas. And at the time, I was working at the Atlas Network, which is supporting groups, but it's more on the sidelines, sort of in a way, providing best practices to think tank in terms of management, some grant making, celebrating success. And I was in charge of one of the main award programs that Atlas had, the Templeton Freedom Award, that still has. And so I got I got to see with that a lot of success happening all across the world in all these think tanks. And I wanted to be in the field, not just in the sidelines. So one thing just built onto the other, and I just ended up taking the entrepreneurial, or like intellectual entrepreneurial leap of faith, and just starting
Yeah.
my own think tank. So it started from, I think I was thinking about it for a few months, maybe a year before I launched it and doing some of the paperwork. But I did needed to just make the jump and just go at that point to tell my boss at the time, hey, I want to start my own thing. Here's the plan. Um, I need someone sort of to make that transition and to start fundraising and to start working. But this is what I want to do. So I was thinking about it for a while, thinking about my dreams, even before that, what I wanted to do with my life, and rekindling the American dream and all that. And but it's just, when you start a business, we just say, okay, I'm starting. You just have to go for it. And there's no perfect timing. There's no perfect moment. I remember I was actually buying a house at the time. So as I started Archbridge, I was in the process of moving houses too. So I put an offer for a house, and I was switching jobs at the time. So I bought a house, started Archbridge. Our kids were 2 and 5 at the time, so they were still young. But it's just there's no perfect moment. If I would have waited, we wouldn't be here today. And I just so in that way, in that moment, it's a catalyst event that's just like, no, okay, I want to do it now. I don't want to keep thinking about it. I don't want to keep finding a perfect moment. But in a way, it was a little bit slower, just in the sense that I've been thinking about it for a few months or a couple of years before that, just or even as I said, from the beginning of my career, trying to lead my own American dream was trying to do something entrepreneurial myself.
Yeah. So specifically with starting Archbridge, was there like a gap in the think tank space, a gap, kind of gap in the market that you thought you could fill? There's no shortage of free market economic liberty organizations. What weren't other people doing that you wanted Archbridge to do differently?
Yeah, and I think that's always key. As I said before, like I moved to a place where there is a lot of competition for this. There's a lot of, I just say, free market groups or economic liberty minded organizations, and how can we be different? And what I was working before at Atlas, we were coaching other think tanks to think, okay, what is your comparative advantage? Have you studied your own think tank market, what you want to do? So I did study that for a while, and there's different things that I wanted, I think, to do. But what I thought the niche I wanted to fill in the market that I thought we weren't discussing too much as a movement, were dismissing a lot of concerns about inequality too much, not engaging too much in that debate. And that debate is related to mobility, to poverty in a way. But it was about that income inequality debate, which is still dominating our conversations, policy conversations to this day. And I agree with many of the reasons why we don't engage with it. But I think we're losing, or we've been losing the battle of ideas because of that, because we don't engage in that field, which is front and center for policymakers and for people. I just thought and still think that social mobility should be the main focus of these debates and not inequality, which is why it forms such an important part of our work that you're working on, obviously, on the economics of human flourishing pillar that we have. And you have misguided policies and people, like we see now with AOC or Mandani and others who speak more from a place, I think, of envy or not understanding policy too much, that they focus on income inequality because of those issues. But what I've been wanting to do from the beginning is just try to maybe take a more charitable approach to people who worried about inequality. So if we start with the why, and I always like to start with the why in everything that we're doing or everything that happens, why people are engaged in those debates. And in a more charitable view, more people who care about inequality, for me, it's because they care about the poor and they care that the poor are being left behind. And as I said, that's why I started working, studying economics, working in this field. And but I think what people don't know is that, or don't think about too much later, is that they don't have the typical solutions to reduce inequality, like maybe taxes and distribution and welfare, or other things. They don't improve social mobility or reduce poverty in the long run, and they might not even reduce inequality in the long run. And those are all different issues to start with, and poverty, inequality, and mobility are not. So I think what was missing in the market was people engaging more in these debates from more classical liberal perspective. What's missing is that a lot of people are intertwined to this day those terms together when they shouldn't. Poverty, mobility, and inequality are all different. So I thought this is an area that I think is very good for us to work on. And as I said, like, given my background or thinking about getting into the world of economics and think tanks with this urge to how do we solve poverty, but in reality, it's how do we remove barriers for people to climb the income ladder so more people can escape poverty. But it's not just the first rung; it's just consecutively just going up to all the different rungs and being successful. And I think for what people doesn't don't understand either is that inequality is not the blame of the rich being rich or the poor being poor, or that the rich don't pay their fair share of taxes, which they do. I think it's about barriers that the middle class and upper middle class can overcome easier than the poor, which ends up increasing that inequality gap. So, for example, if there's a bad school system or overburdensome regulations to start a business, or housing costs are very high because of excessive zoning, the middle class or the rich can overcome those easier. They can move neighborhoods to a better school system. They can buy a house in a different area or move, or they can have more time and money to overcome bad regulation and start a business. But the poor can't. So that those barriers are the one that are increasing that gap, and those barriers stand in the way people climb the income ladder. And so, but at the same time, so I think that we can remove those barriers to mobility. Some people can come income ladder, and I think that will remove those barriers and reduce the income gap as well. So I think, in a way, I think not a lot of people think in those terms if they're worried about inequality too much. They're not as charitable, maybe. But I think I choose to be, and I chose that this would be an issue that we get into because I think there's a lot of common ground that we can have and we can resolve a lot of these issues. We're starting with the why that we're all here to give more, to remove barriers to opportunity, remove barriers to mobility and to flourishing so more people can be successful. And so that's from that perspective, which we started really focused on social mobility and pushing back against what I think is a polarizing zero sum narrative of income inequality. But I think also there wasn't an American Dream think tank per se, because as I said, like I was thinking about the American Dream questions and the issue at the time and that there wasn't a think tank that had a holistic vision for human flourishing like we have today at Archbridge. That we're still trying to continuously improve on that holistic vision of human flourishing. But I think that more optimistic, unifying narrative of flourishing and not just economic freedom, and in a multidisciplinary way, like we're doing it, there wasn't a lot of that in the market. So those are sort of
Yeah.
the three main issues that I was trying to address: better and more important research and advocacy, or outreach, basically, on communicating better on mobility and equality, the American dream angle, and the human flourishing.
Yeah. I think that's all really fantastic, and obviously I agree. I worked there,
Hopefully, you're still motivated
just
to
to come
still
work
work
there.
with us now.
Absolutely. Yes, I mean, I obviously love what I do at Archbridge. I could not have imagined a better job and a better fit, to
I'm
be
not paying you to
honest. And I'm
say
not just
that.
saying that just because you're. And I'm not just saying this because you're right there. Yeah, I think, and like that's how I start. How we start the social mobility of the 50 states report is
Mhm,
kind of interlocking a lot of these ideas that, if you care about the American dream, if you think about the American dream, what you're really talking about is mobility and vice versa. Like people who are talking about mobility are talking about the core principles of the American dream. And the people who talk about the American dream, they are talking about mobility. I think that's a very important piece to mention. And I think that kind of gets to what you're saying about all of the kind of whole encompassing of what we are all trying to do here, um, do with Archbridge.
yeah.
So what did the first few years look like, right? Because it had to have been, there's obviously uncertainty, like with anyone leaving their, normal job to start something new, whether that's in the nonprofit or think tanks space,
Mhm,
in the private sector, starting a, new firm, leaving a kind of stable income, stable job to start something new is obviously risky. There's a lot of uncertainty.
mhm.
So what did those first years look like? Was did anyone tell you it was like a bad idea?
Yeah, a few people did for sure. There's always doubters. There's always people who say, "Well, I don't think this is going to work," from donors or from other people, or like people not being as excited. So that always comes with the territory for anything that you want to start, any startup. Um, you have to believe in more the idea than other people. So that's already like you have to start with that. What I learned, I think, the hard way in those first few years, that personal brands matter, and I didn't have one at the time. And it's crucial for startups as people invest, or in our case, donate more to people and not to projects or institutions. So I needed to have more of my personal brand. And at the time, the researchers that we had at the beginning took a while to deliver on their research, which held us back from showing results to some donors at the beginning. And if I would have studied and written more of our topics about these topics before, starting to think tanks and having my own personal brand instead of analyzing the field and obviously relying on most, because we work with, and since the beginning, from some of um, the best experts in this field. But obviously, everyone has um, their own work and take a while to deliver and things. So sometimes the project delivery was delayed. So that didn't help with some donors. But if I could have contributed to that myself with my personal brand and producing more content by being more of an expert in this field before, I could have had more to show to donors. And that's sort of what I learned from that beginning. But yeah, I mean, we did have two or three donors at the beginning that really trusted us and continue, I think, with us to this day. But there's always, I think, a lot of doubters. What I said, like, you just have to believe in what you want to do more and just move forward. But it wasn't the big, those first few years, a roller coaster of a ride, I think, and continues to be like any startup. There was a time I ended up driving for Uber to make ends meet, like around 2018, a couple of years after I founded it, just to meet ends meet at home because fundraising ended up being slow and payrolls were being were being saved by some donors at the last minute or had to be suspended for a cycle or two. That was way before your time, Justin. So don't worry, it's not happening nowadays. It's
I had
just
one
those
follow-up
first,
question on that.
yeah, no, those first few years, and yeah, in some years I had to, a couple of years I have to take half of my salary, but but we persevered, and I think I've done well now. But that is the story of the American dream itself, and of millions of Americans throughout U.S. history going through those things. So I think I'm just one more person living the dream as part of this great American tradition of taking risks, working hard, believing in an idea without giving up. So yeah, it's definitely harder in the first few years. I don't, maybe you know more the statistic than I do, but I think most businesses die within the first 5 years as a startup. Most
Yeah.
startups don't survive. So yeah, so those first 5 years, as I said, maybe to the point to exactly 5 years were tougher. Then there are growing pains. So as you grow, maybe you have more expenditures too. So there's always challenges, right? In it, but yeah, but that's just, I think, as I said, like a great American tradition of just persevering, believing in your idea more than anyone else. And yeah, that's what I had to rely on, and just grit basically to push forward.
Yeah.
But as I said, I think that's the story of America. Millions of Americans before me or that will come after me. But
Yeah.
that's part of it in the first few years for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't. I think one thing that is kind of really beautiful about that story is that you kind of see now, all of the hard work and the risk that you took really paying off. Like I think that we're in a really
Mm,
great spot right now. So
mm,
I'm obviously very excited about both the present and the future. So I think
good.
that that's really great. So looking back, almost, or I guess actually basically almost exactly to the day, a decade later. What about Archbridge today would have surprised the version of you that started it in 2016?
Mm. Yeah, it might sound weird, but actually nothing. I think what we're doing today is what always was part of the plan. I think it was always what was part of what I wanted to do when I founded the institute, and it just became obviously easier to accomplish, and we can get more stuff done when more people join the team, such as Clay, Ed, yourself, and others. And so I think that different pieces of the puzzle fell in place in sometimes serendipitous ways. It's certainly a good coincidence, but I think it's exactly what I wanted to do. Is what we're doing now, and I don't want to scare you, but obviously we have a lot more to get done, and the clock is ticking.
Right.
But yeah, but definitely there's a lot of plans from there that we're doing now. Obviously, you're working on right now the International Social Mobility Index that we're working on. And that was the first project that I wanted us to have ever since I founded the institute. So now
Wow.
they did
Okay.
a US version of it for like
Right.
started 4 years ago for the US version, I think,
Yes. Yeah.
for the first edition. But that was something from the beginning that I wanted to do. We came close with a couple of donors to get some funding for that. It didn't work. We had to wait for a few years, but that, because I think it's a good product to have, like something that could attract policy attention, research attention, media. But anyhow, but a lot of those
Keeps me
things
busy.
keep you busy, obviously. Sorry about that, but no,
Oh,
but yeah, I
no.
think it's
It's great work, obviously.
yeah, but yeah, those are things that I wanted to do. There's a lot of work to be done, and I can go and have maybe something to just close with later on everything that needs to be done, for sure. But I think it's the plans are there. It's just it sometimes takes more than you expect because of all the roller coaster of things. Because we don't. There's periods where um, we don't get funding for some projects that we do end up funding in eventually. It's not that we don't have new projects. It's not that I envisioned everything of the projects that we're doing now. I envisioned them back then, but a big part of it's like, well, the idea of the institute being multidisciplinary, the idea of like not focusing only on economics, not only in economic research, but still having robust and very well done academic research influencing policy, all of that stuff in broad terms was there. So it's just that, as I said, like it's becoming much more impactful and easier to accomplish when we have a great people like we have on our team now that are making this happen. I think I sort of try to what we're doing now is it's not deviating as much from what I thought when we started the institute and what we still have to, I think, accomplish.
I think what I love about that is that, it's important to mention is that, having these sort of like founding principles, right? Like you said, with the founding principles of the founding fathers, the American dream, the founding principles of Archbridge haven't changed,
Mm,
right? Obviously, you couldn't envision every single piece in every single project or report or, you know, com- uh, communications piece or advocacy. Like you can't imagine, what that would look like. But the
mm.
founding principles about it are the same, which I think is a beautiful story, and
Yeah.
that's one that I hope to be continue to be a part of and continue those founding principles and building
Yeah.
out into the future.
Yeah, a couple of examples. So Ed Timmons, our VP of policy, I met him whenever I first started the institute, and I like the issue of occupational licensing, which he's an expert on. And we started thinking about, like, I was like, oh, I wish there's a lot of good data on economic mobility. I wish we could connect that to occupational licensing. And I didn't know he was an expert at the time, but I met him in just a bus ride in an event going somewhere.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm saying, serendipitous ways in which things happen. It's like, oh, wait, so he was an expert on that, and I didn't know at the time. And then someone else from our team connected us later when I told him, hey, why don't you go out and look for someone? It's like, oh, wait, this person says he met you before and he would be willing to do it. Well, that was Ed. So it's serendipitous ways. For a long time, I was like, well, I think our founding principle is that economic freedom is crucial to social mobility. I wish I could find a scholar that connects both of those issues very well. And then, boom, Justin arrives, and you're one of the become one of the best experts in this field. But you worked on this project before, and I sort of serendipitously. I mean, I've been following Fraser Institute for a while. It's a great think tank in Canada. But you brought a report for them. It's like, oh wait, serendipitously, it's like they're trying to make a connection in an introduction to that report one of the years, and that's where I found out about your work. But it's like, we're great. I wanted someone like that from the beginning because I knew if I wanted to develop a social mobility index, it has to have this angle of economic freedom. And then you appeared, obviously, and finding principle of like having multidisciplinary research. And then someone introduced us to the work of Clay, who is now our COO and executive VP, on meaning and the psychology of flourishing, which is a huge aspect of what we do now, and a huge aspect of what I think is human flourishing. It's not the economic side of it as well, or the culture, but it's the psychology of it. And he's one of the best experts on that. But I met him. We found him because, well, one of our people at the time, Ben Wilterdink, was now at SPN, knew him and knew about his work on meaning, and then we started connecting as a fellow on one thing, and then he joined us full time. But all that stuff happened not in a planned way, but as you say, the founding principle of like, let's make this work multidisciplinary, because if not, we wouldn't have brought him even as a fellow. But I did have that perspective from the beginning. It's just like I didn't know too many people outside of economics. As a good economist, I suppose. We're not engaging, which means actually a bad economist. We have to engage with other disciplines. But like at the time, I just didn't know about Kling, and then serendipitously found him, and we hit it off, and we're doing great work with him for sure. But as you said, founding principles were there, just things fell into place in very good ways.
Yeah, but I think it's great. And yeah, and like and going to your story about how we first got connected. I
Hmm.
mean, it wasn't like, I went to grad school and was like, I'm going to link economic freedom with income mobility. It just so
Hmm.
happened I was working with my, still good friend, Vincent Geloso. And, he just kind of emailed me, it was still kind of during COVID. I didn't have much going on other than grad school, but it was all, at this point, mostly online. He just reached out kind of randomly, got an email, woke up and, saw like, hey, we're working on, I want to work on this report with Frazier. Are you interested? And again, like what I said earlier about the, when you're wondering why some countries are rich and others are poor, it's hard to think about anything else. That sort
Hmm.
of same light bulb moment happened for me. And then obviously we wrote the report, you reached out, and we started working together, part time, and never did I think, that this would
Hmm.
ever turn into anything other than, maybe like a one off project would be great to work with, a good group. And, now it's my full time job. So
There you
yeah, there
go.
we go.
There you go. What more can
Yeah,
you
I
do?
think that's great. So obviously, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, talk about Archbridge, talk about the founding. The other main reason is to talk about the American Dream snapshot, which I believe is, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was essentially the first like flagship program or project that Archbridge started doing, because it's the seventh year that this is we've done this survey.
Hmm.
So I want to talk about the American Dream snapshot, but before, you also wrote a piece that was really interesting that connected the World Cup to the American Dream. And by the time this episode airs, the tournament's going to be over. But I still think, ideally, that ethos of World Cup football,
Hmm.
soccer, talking, is kind of making its rounds around the U.S. People are very excited about it. So
Hmm.
could you give people like just kind of a short elevator pitch about what this piece is, and I'll link the piece in the show notes so that people can check it out as well.
Yeah, no, I just try to make the link because obviously, as a Uruguayan, being born in Uruguay, we're a very small country, 3 million. We won the first World Cup. We won the two previous tournaments before the World Cup started, which was the World Cup was played in the Olympics. So we won 24 and 28 tournaments in the Olympics. And then we won in 1950. So there's a huge tradition in Uruguay about football, or we call it football or soccer, we call it here. And I'm just in love with the sport from a very young age, and having played it, that's a commonality that I have from all the different countries that I've lived in. And that's why it's a universal sport. A lot of people play it everywhere, and it's the beautiful game, as they call it. It's for a reason. As you can see here, I have my Ted Lasso Believe poster, obviously. And if anyone hasn't watched Ted Lasso, you should watch it. It's a fun, entertaining thing. It's not doesn't go into the, like Justin, he should for sure.
I'm one
It's
of them.
not the
Yeah.
one of the. It's not about. It's a good field story mixing good American show entertainment with football. But anyhow, I think it's just that it's been in my blood, and I see a lot of similarities. So first of all, I think the American dream. I sort of try to go through uh, three three things that I think what makes the American dream and football or soccer connected. First, it's that they both started in they have similar origin stories because they're started by British sailors, basically. So the United States, the American dream, was founded by people sailing from the UK, from England, and from other countries in the United Kingdom to settle the United States. And soccer started in the same way. It was taken internationally. The sport was invented in England, the current version of it. And obviously, people can say this historically. Other examples of sports similar to that, but the current version that we have and the rules and everything that we have started in England in the 1800s and was exported in a way to different countries by British sailors as they're doing their own exports. They just went, like, docked, took down the shipments, whatever they were doing, and then they just started playing football outside of the port, like in the ports. People started seeing that in different countries and started liking that story. Like in that sport. So I have a similar origin stories, but it's so easy to do and replicate because the second point I try to make is that it's an equal opportunity sport, basically, just like the American dream. It's very simple to play, make it very popular worldwide. You don't need any fancy equipment or a lot of money to play. Just anyone can join anywhere at any time. You just need a couple of things, whatever they are. It can be like a jacket, it can be like an actual post, something to mark as a goal, and just a
Yeah.
ball, and just play it. And I think it's truly universal, as I said before, just as the promise of the American dream is meant to be universal, offering the possibility of a better, richer, and fuller life, regardless of where you begin. I think that that's sort of the promise of equal opportunity for soccer as well. And yeah, so it's basically the third point is about that, about how it enables people to succeed. There are countless football stories that reflect sort of the ethos of the American dream, that if you work hard, overcome barriers, uh, and achieve, that you aspire for more, you push the frontiers and sheer grit in that sport, you can rise from the bottom to the top of the income ladder through talent and determination. And that says, I think, something just more powerful about sports in general. But I think soccer contains a lot of more stories just because of how affordable it is to start playing it, and how there's a much bigger market for it all across the world. Obviously, the bigger market for sports might be the U.S. Because of the different sports and different leagues and different teams and all that. But internationally, the scale of the game is just simply bigger. There's more people watching
Yeah.
and more fans. So I think that makes it even not easier. There's more opportunities to find some of these American dream stories of people having better, richer, fuller
Yeah.
lives.
It's certainly more approachable than a sport like golf, where the equipment's very expensive.
Yeah,
And yeah, I
yeah.
remember, I mean, not a, I've become a much bigger fan because of the World Cup.
Hmm.
But there was one that even, I grew up playing, just a little bit with some friends. Like we kind of add American football and
Hmm.
basketball and like all these different sports. And yeah, I mean, it's easy, right? In terms of approaching it, that, you set up, you put someone's shirt and then, two
Hmm.
people's shirts, that's their, okay, that's the, the goalie or the net basically.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's approachable. Well, unfortunately both of our teams are out as of
Yep.
recording of this episode. And
Yes.
much to your chagrin, I will be rooting for Argentina the rest of the way there.
Which
And
is a strike one, obviously. For no, but it's okay. Yeah, I put before the when that article when you'll read it. Obviously, as I said, this is going to be aired afterwards. I put Uruguay just because I can't not bet on my team, which I shouldn't have because I knew they weren't coming in as good as we would like. We just did a worse job than I thought. But I put Portugal as second option, and they're also out at this point in the tournament. But even though it's going to come out later, I'm going to predict it's going to be France winning it again with the level of play of how they're
well,
been
Argentina
playing.
won last time.
Yes.
Argentina
Let
beat France last time actually,
let's
and
agree to disagree so we don't get a strike two on the book.
this is fair.
No, I'm
All I'll
kidding.
say is,
No,
I'm from
no.
Southeast Louisiana.
Yeah.
We are the French Canadians that were, kicked
Yeah.
out and had to settle down here. So you're
Mhm.
never going to see me root for France. I
I
can't
know.
do
It's
it.
okay.
Won't
And
do
you'll
it.
never see me root for Argentina as much as I would like and as much as people in America would like. But yeah,
This is
it's a
fair. Yeah,
long
you
story.
can't like your neighbors. Yeah, I mean this is fair. This is You're not going to root for your
Yeah.
neighbors. This is why
Yeah.
college football rivalries exist. Is that
Yes,
they're close to each other. They're
exactly.
not going to like each other. It just is what it is.
Exactly.
So let's get to the American Dream snapshot.
Yes, sir.
Seventh year that Archbridge has run the survey. This one's a special edition with America 250, and there's an interesting difference that I notice in the snapshot, and I'm interested to see if you agree. So over
Hmm.
67%,
Interesting.
or basically 2/3, say that they've either achieved the American Dream or are on track. And that's important because that gets to the question that they're asked, the main question in the survey that they're asked, which is, have you achieved the American Dream? You person responding, or are you on your way, or you think it's out of reach? So again, 2/3 agree that they've either achieved it or are on track. Most other surveys say around 50%. Gallup, I think for the first time had less than 50%. Say that the concept of the American Dream is basically dead.
Hmm.
And I think how I view it, at least, is that it's a matter of perception. We're surrounded, by a lot of bad news, negativity, reasons to doubt, and reasons to be pessimistic. And there are real concerns. I mean, I'm not going to, throw away real concerns about housing affordability, cost of living, etc. But I think it's a matter of perception because we're surrounded by this bad news, bad publicity, bad negativity. You ask people about others, they're pessimistic because they're looking at, they're seeing a lot of the perception of like what's going on elsewhere. But then you ask people about their own lives, and as the survey shows, they're much more optimistic. And I think that's a better way of actually figuring out the state of the American dream, is asking people about their own experience so that it's, more direct versus how do you think other people are doing, which is hard to gauge other than through like vibes, basically. So are there any thoughts there? Do you tend to agree with that framing, or what do you see?
So I think that's um, some of the main differences that we see in our survey compared to others. That we just ask people directly, "What do you think? Have you achieved your own American dream, or you're on the way to achieve it, or their families?" But I'm asking about their own life, and I think a lot of the other surveys ask about the abstract concept of the American dream. In some cases, and even using the same polling firm that we use, NORC at the University of Chicago. There's other surveys that NORC has done with, for example, Wall Street Journal, when they people are asked, "Do you think that if you work hard and you'll get ahead, which is the main definition of the American dream, do you think it still holds?" So it's already like defining one area of the American dream and defining, just asking about that abstract definition and in a leading way, and not asking them about their own lives, or asking about, do you think most Americans can achieve the American dream, or think the American dream is alive well? So asking about the concept and not about their own lives. And it happens even in our survey, because we have a question that's, do you think that most Americans can achieve the American dream? And I think it's 48% that say yes, and 48% that said yes, and 52, I think, that say no. But it's still lower than those 2/3, 67% of people that say yes. It's alive and well in the sense that I'm either have achieved it, or I'm on my way to achieve it. So it's just the framing of the questions matter a lot.
Yeah.
And I think just what you see in negative, in pessimism and negativity and cynicism across our culture more broadly, there is this push for more of that. That sort of is a way for media outlets to get more clicks when they're reporting, to get for a way for politicians from either side of the aisle to say, look, the American dream is dead. Follow me and follow my ideas, and I'll help you rekindle it. But it's never been about politics, so it's never been about just perceptions. In a way, it's been about people just acting, having a dream and acting on it to pursue it. And it's more individual in nature in terms of them pursuing it. Obviously, there's people, we have a question, an open-ended question towards the end that asks, who's someone who has helped you achieve it? So it's not that individual, in the sense that it's not that your family doesn't help you, it's not that a neighbor, a mentor, a teacher, someone helps you. It's still a more it's more a community oriented concept, maybe, but you have to put in the work. You have to do it. And I think, regardless if there's barriers now, which still need to be addressed, and challenges, the main idea of it is that you have to overcome them. So there's always um, that more optimistic nature about it, because you still have to pursue it and overcome anything. But I think if you have a lot of these more pessimistic narratives asking about, in a more distanced way, about a concept or an idea related to it, you'll get more pessimistic answers, but it just risks becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Obviously, things now, what we ask in our survey, 33% of people say it's out of reach. And why it's out of reach? They say economic conditions. So things are not well. Like 64% of people say it's economic conditions. Why do you think it's out of reach? Things are not well. Things could improve. There's a reason for that. But I think from when we first started it, and maybe I think the 2022 was the year where we had more optimism, which 18% of people, only 18 say it's out of reach, and now it's 33. That in a way shows that self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you hear a lot of pessimism around it in the news or in media or from others, or from politicians, you'll become a little bit more negative about it. And so we need to sort of, the idea what we've done this survey is to push back, to show more optimism. And as I said, the good thing is that in 64, no way, the good thing, 64% of people think it's outreach because of economic conditions. Those can improve through policy. So there's still a way to get out of that, and still a way to maybe switch, to turn the tide away. But I think just giving up on the concept is wrong. And how we ask about it risks making it become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have the same thing in another survey we did a while back on hope in America. 82% of people were hopeful about their own future. You hope about your future, about your family. 85% said yes. When we asked them, when we kept distancing them from who we're asking them about it, they said, "You hopeful about the future of the country." Only 56% of people said they're hopeful about the country. But if they're all hopeful about their own lives, and so many of them are, there should be hope for the country, right? Broadly.
Yeah, like if I don't want to say everyone, but if the vast majority of people are optimistic about their own situation, but they're pessimistic about everybody else, that delta, that difference is perception. It's the difference in perception and perhaps how
Yes.
the question's asked and whatever. Yeah, so I think, this is, and this isn't even a project that I, work on directly. I'm not an author on the project, but it is maybe my favorite thing that the Archbridge does. I really enjoyed the survey, so I'm not just biased because it's something that that I work on. But when you ask people what the dream is actually made of, what I found interesting, and this is held the last few years that I've checked, wealth comes in dead last of all the things
Mm-hmm.
we could ask, or all the things we do ask. Of what is the dream made of? Wealth is dead last. Becoming rich, only 17% say that,
Mm-hmm.
versus 80% of freedom of choice to live their own lives, and 76% for a good family life. And even not as many people, I believe it's around 50% maybe, say that like owning a home is a necessary part of the American dream, and that's held steady through a pandemic, through inflation. So why do you think that's the case? Is this a product of, we already are a very rich country, not feeling like, okay, well, we already got kind of the basics down, right? We've solved the issue of
Mm-hmm.
abject, desperate poverty for the vast majority of people in the country. So is it a lot of people, is it just kind of a nature of, we're a rich
Mm-hmm.
country, becoming wealthy isn't necessarily something that's, the most crucial thing in my life, because I prefer to have, a good work-life balance. So I'm not going to, take this 70-hour a week gig
Mm-hmm.
that I could get paid a lot of money and, become rich and, do really well, but
Mm-hmm.
it'll come at the cost of potentially a good family life. Um, or is it something else that's going on? Like, how do you interpret that interesting finding? Because I think whenever most people, if you ask a
Mhm.
lot of people about, what do other people see as the American dream? Again, you ask about this kind of perception. It would be, you know, good, becoming rich or owning a home, but those things rank really, really low relative to freedom of choice, good family life, other aspects.
Yes, and I think it's had a little bit to do with that. Maybe that we already have some wealth. I would say that yeah, when people ask people if you think they think becoming wealthy is essential, yeah, it's only 17%. When we ask them, it's important but not essential. Yeah, a majority of them say it's important but not
Right.
essential. But so there is that, and it's not that it doesn't matter. But I think the promise of the American dream from the beginning has been, as the Declaration of Independence says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So there's other aspects of the founding of the country, of how people have been motivated since the founding to first found the country, to then act on their own lives, to live, that they want to have freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of their own lives to do and be whatever they want to be, and that having a good life matters more than other things. I think that they want, because I said, like people all across the world, in the US, obviously, that is the case. People just want a better life for themselves and for their kids, and having a good family life is a big component of it. The American dream of a better, richer, and fuller lives is a quest for happiness, a quest for meaning and flourishing. And I think those are things that money helps, obviously, but they're not the main things. And I think it's just there's been too many caricatures about the American dream being about the house and the car and about becoming wealthy and famous. But I don't think that that's the case more broadly. I think just a caricature that maybe the media or like even builders at the beginning after the Second World War said, "Oh, you need a house to live your American dream." It's part of it. I think what people like more, because there was a great Rocket Mortgage commercial in I think the last Super Bowl, the one this year or last year, was about about showing like, oh, people want a house, but all the things around that commercial were just people not wanting the physical building of a house, but a home, having that good family life. So I think that commercial itself, it wasn't about selling the promise of the American dream as the physical structure, but just that good family life of having your family enjoying under a roof. You can have that by renting. You don't need to own the house for that. But I think it's just a caricature that people have used. But I think even in 1931, when James Trosley Adams defined that term, uh, he defined part of the definition after the Better, Richer, and Fuller Life is about like that. He specifically says it's not about. I'm gonna butcher it maybe a little bit, but it's not about high wages or cars. It's about being the best, living to your fullest potential, regardless of where you started. So it's all about that promise of meaning and freedom in your life. And I think that that's reflective since the beginning of the country to now.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think the pursuit of happiness is by its nature very subjective in the sense of what makes you happy. What is the pursuit of your specific happiness? So I think that that's a very important aspect, and I'm glad that or it's good to see that um, holds true, and people still hold on to that kind of core principle of the promise of the American dream. So let's go into some lightning round questions. There'll be just a few, kind of quick rapid fire responses. What is one policy, or if you want to dive in a little bit more, you can name two or three that you think does the most damage to the American dream today?
Think occupational licensing and the lack of school choice are the two policies that I would say are hurting or have the most potential to enable more American dreams now.
Yeah. Okay. If you could take one number or fact from this year's snapshot on a billboard, the
Mhm.
maybe one that we haven't discussed so far, which one would you pick and why?
I think it would come from the 33% of people who said the American dream is dead. Only 8% of those said it was because of a fundamental disbelief in the American dream, which is just 2 or 3% of the total sample that we had. So for me, it's very positive. So I would put in the billboard only 2%, rounding it downwards instead of upwards. Only 2% of Americans think there is a fundamental disbelief in the American dream.
Hmm.
Dream forward. I don't know. So
Yeah.
there's more optimism
Believe
than fear.
with the Ted Lasso
Believe,
sign in the back. Believe with the Ted
exactly.
Lasso
Believe.
sign. Yeah.
Believe
Great.
in the dream. Yes.
So you've written that some native-born Americans undervalue what you call the national ethos of the American dream. So what is it specifically that you think kind of takes it gets taken for granted?
So I think the American dream is a a promise. People think it's a promise that everyone should get or have without putting in the work, without having a dream in the first place, without a vision, goals, or any plans to pursue it. And just more importantly, that you can achieve it without acting on your agency and striving to achieve it every day by working on it without suffering, without overcoming barriers, or without any obstacles. That's, I think, what people take for granted, that it just exists and that they should have access to it, and that's it. But I think all of that is opposite to the American dream. You have to have the dream in the first place, pursue it, plan, act on it, overcome barriers, suffer, overcome obstacles. But I think
Yeah.
some native born Americans undervalue how crucial it is for the future of the country, but also what you need to attain it.
hmm Yeah, I agree there. So let kind of building on that. So rapid fire question that kind of builds onto another one. Let's talk about immigration for a second. So one thing
Mhm.
I always think about on why the American dream is still alive is because people from all around the world keep moving here and they keep wanting to move here. On the flip side, you were born in Uruguay, you moved here for your own American dream. What can immigrants learn about the American dream when coming here?
Yeah, I think that it's a powerful cultural ethos that binds the country together and has done for generations, and that none of the countries that we've moved from has. That it's part of the social fabric that makes the country great, and that they shouldn't dismiss it eventually. I imagine they don't dismiss it from the get go, but dismiss it eventually because of pessimistic narratives or politicians, and shouldn't dismiss it and actually work hard to achieve their own dreams so they can be a living proof that the American dream is alive and well and inspire future generations to do the same.
Mhm. So, what country in Latin America do you think are doing best at their own version of the American dream, or one that has, you think the momentum's going in the right direction?
I think for now, I would have to say I'm very bullish in Argentina that they're taking the steps to rekindle what was a great country a century or so, more than a century or so ago. And then after a lot of different bad governments, policies became um, a very a basket case, I suppose, of very bad economics. But now I think it's turning the tide. It's an inflection point. I think it's doing the best and have the most positive momentum to live out their own version of the American dream. And I think President Milei, Argentina, actually alluded to that in a talk he gave a few weeks ago at the Milken Global Conference, relating actually the American dream to what they're pursuing. They're trying to pursue in Argentina, the Argentinian dream as well. As you said, it's gonna be different, adapted culturally to what they want to achieve. But the promise of a great country, that there's more opportunity for more people, that is successful in many areas of economic society, like it was in the past. I think that they have the best momentum to achieve great results on what they're doing now.
Mhm. So, yeah, rooting for Argentina, just not their football team.
Yes,
Fair enough.
exactly.
Uh, so, do you have a particular person in history or present whose American dream story that you think kind of goes unnoticed or underappreciated?
Yeah, I think for me, as I said, my inspiration, my own American dream journey started in a way by Walt Disney. And I think people know that he had an American dream story. But people, I think, underappreciate everything, or just think that what happens as well a lot with a lot of income inequality talks is that you see the person when he's successful and they don't see the path that they took there. But uh, Disney's family was very poor. There were five brothers and sisters. Him and his brother Roy ended up starting Disney Studios without a lot of money, just overcoming a lot of barriers. They didn't have a lot of like profit for the first 20 years of the company, but just persevered, innovated, inspired so many others. So I think it's a very underappreciated story of Walt Disney, and we have an American original on our website discussing the life of Walt Disney. And the title of that series that we have of trying to highlight a lot of these stories, some of them more well known than others, is called American Originals, precisely because one of the one of the best biographies on Disney. That's Walt Disney, an American original, because I think he encapsulates a lot of those aspects of the American dream. Some of my other favorites are Madame C.J. Walker, who we also have an American original story about. The first self-made woman millionaire. She was born to freed slaves, was a single mom, and became a millionaire. And there's a great series on Netflix. If you don't want to read books or anything, or this story that we produced about her, there's a great series produced by LeBron James, actually, on Netflix. I don't know if it's still there, about the life of Madame C.J. Walker. So I think those are two that I would always like to highlight.
Yeah, those are two great stories. Yeah, and I think that gets to the point of the struggle is necessary often to get to success, and that the path is not always linear, and it's not always smooth. That it can be very rocky and have a lot of trials and tribulations along the way, but with
Yes,
that can come major success if you keep believing in yourself, keep believing in what the dream holds.
exactly.
So, last question. What do you
Yes.
see as next for Archbridge after kind of the first 10 years? Where do you see the next 10 years going?
Yeah, I think we will continue striving to be thought leaders on human flourishing, always connecting the three pillars of our work on the economics, ecology, and culture of human flourishing. I think that many of our current and upcoming products will continue informing policy and public debates, and that we will be able to meaningfully change the Overton window in many of these areas. Social mobility, human flourishing, and living the good life, I think, are all about the entire life cycle of people and everything that happens in between. So there are many areas, other areas, and a lot of more work to be done to tackle as many issues as possible and to provide an inspirational and unifying vision for human flourishing. So a lot of more work to be done, obviously a lot on your shoulders. Don't be scared, but I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot that we can still do, that we should do, to really continue connecting the dots among these three pillars. And even as we just turned 10, I still think of Archbridge as a startup and that we're just getting started. So there's a lot more to come.
Well, cheers to the next 10 years, and my plan is still be there
There we
accordingly.
go.
So let's keep it moving. Well, Gonzalo, thank you so
Excellent.
much. This was a great conversation. Really enjoyed your insights, your stories, and your own American dream. And I think that's great. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Thanks again to my boss, Gonzalo Schwarz, for a great conversation with From Ideas to Innovation, where we bring together innovators, academics, and policymakers. And thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please drop a comment below, check out our show notes on our Substack, and please like and subscribe to this episode.